So we're really looking forward to this session today, and I want to introduce our three speakers who are going to be on the panel for us today. The first is Christopher Key. Christopher is the global practice lead for the Hackett Group. He leads IT executive practice, advisory practice and has nearly 20 years of consulting and professional services experience with a focus in information technology and shared service center operations and excellence. During his tenure, he successfully delivered over 45 benchmark engagements for global companies with complex organizational environments to drive sustainable performance improvement, leading to lower costs, higher quality, and better margins. And Chris, thank you for joining us today. Our second speaker today, Dan Moses. He's a director at PwC, specializes in IT and technology-driven business considerations for private held organizations, including IT organizations, technology vendor selection, ERP, e-commerce, and the use of cloud technologies. Dan also performs due diligence in deals where technology is a key factor, advising clients and financial buyers in pre- and post-deal situations on matters such as realization of technology-oriented synergies, carve-out plans, and realignment of IT strategies. So Dan, we appreciate you being here today. Thank you.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Our third speaker, many of you know, Peter Carlson. He's currently a partner in New Ventures, as well as the founder of the technology consultancy New Eon Incorporated. He serves as an advisor to new venture portfolio companies and has served on various nonprofit boards. Peter continues to teach as an instructor for Entrepreneurship for All and as an adjunct faculty member of the Charlton College of Business at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. Thank you, Peter, for being here with us.
Happy to be here, Jeff and Julie. Thanks.
All right, so let's head right into the topics. And what we're going to do today, everyone, is we're going to introduce the three topics, and each of our speakers will take the lead on each of these topics, although I expect all three will weigh in as we go forward. And please, any of you that have something you'd like to weigh in here, we never want this to be a lecture. We want it to be interactive. So if you have something that you want to interject, please put something in the comments or just jump in there, and we're happy to have everybody participate in this. I know everybody knows a lot of people here on the call, and we look forward to hearing from everyone today as we move through this. So our first topic, strategic partnership between IT and business. Very important. As all of you know, IT has become integral in many businesses as we've moved through a tough time, even more so, I think. And Chris Key is going to start a discussion. So Chris, I'll let you share your thoughts on this and we'll move forward.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's pretty clear that even the past few years have really accelerated and elevated IT's role within organizations. Traditionally, IT has been kind of seen as an administrator, a gatekeeper, the software people, right? We are, everybody has demands, from our business partners. They come to us and they expect us to say yes and implement all these new tools and solutions that they have. And I think over the past few years, we've really seen a recognition that, technology is an enabling function for every organization out there, and a recognition that to have resiliency, to have agility, to have good experiences of both our internal stakeholders and our external customers, technology is kind of the cornerstone of those things, and because it's really a value differentiator and a fundamental kind of business engine. Today, we really need to focus on innovating new capabilities while at the same time ensuring efficient and effective operations. So really trying to strike that balance between being that valued business provider and at the same time, maintaining our costs and productivity and all of those things. So it's certainly changing. I'm sure all of you probably have experienced that and experienced that great acceleration at the same time that we have this unfortunate kind of great resignation all happening at the same time. And so we need to, there's going to be a number of topics that we cover, and I don't want to steal Dan or Peter's thunder, but we need to think about, how are we measuring the right performance indicators for the technology function today? How are we looking at agility? How are we looking at, IT's contribution to the top line and the bottom line? So elevating IT to more of the forefront of our customer experiences and our tools. How can we have influence on the products and the platforms that we're supporting, how we design our operating models, our services, how are we leveraging things like cloud to broker and integrate and orchestrate the service delivery model and provide operational and transactional automation, and how do we accomplish all those things, right? So we need to start thinking about our culture, our people, how we're structured, and all of the platforms and processes that we support as organizations. So certainly, a path probably over the last decade or so, moving from that, okay, they're the software implementers, to really being that business partner.
For sure.
I think
Peter,
Dan's going to jump in. Dan was just going to jump in, but I was going to say, when you mentioned agility and the shifting priorities, I think that's the other piece, especially when things change. You're halfway through your year, and hey, we're going to go acquire this company, or hey, we're going to do this, or we're going to divest, or we're going to do, being nimble enough to say, yeah, we can do that, and not be rigid and break your flow. That's where we've seen, especially companies are acquiring other companies or divesting, or when there's change, trying to be able to not to be too brittle and how the processes work. Sorry, Dan, I'll let you go.
Yeah, I was just added some additional color too. I think to Chris's point and to your point too. IT is becoming increasingly a proactive enabler of the business strategy. And look to, I'll put it this way, the concept of technology is not lost on the business stakeholders. Business stakeholders are increasingly becoming more and more sophisticated as end users related to technology, and there's being more asked of the IT organization as a result of that. I think one of the things we'll talk about is how IT is really becoming less about the technology and really becoming more about how does the business become enabled, and understanding how technology is going to be a part of that, because technology is pervasive. I think the big challenge that Chris and Peter also touched on is that IT ops doesn't go away, right? Keeping the lights on doesn't go away. You still have to do that, and it's fundamental and it's the bedrock. But teams and IT organizations are being increasingly asked to do more with the same. So how do you as an organization provide that proactive level of business engagement and enablement, but still doing all of the fundamental things that you've always done? But I do think it's a paradigm shift that's happening with the organizations. I mean, IT is, Chris, I think you put it beautifully, and it's no longer just a back office function, right? There's a lot of back office that happens, but IT is increasingly becoming, I'll call it more of a front office function. And we're seeing this not only in terms of business enablement, but even as organizations seek to bring technology-enabled products and services, right? IT is right on the front lines, and very instrumental to how organizations are bringing the top line and having top line considerations, not just bottom line.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of again over the last decade or so, more convergence between IT and traditional operational technology, right? People are leaning on the traditional kind of back office IT function to help innovate in their operations, innovate in their customer solutions or their customer products. And there's a number of neat examples out there, but we can think about Industry 4.0 and Internet of Things, and monitoring our products, our customer solutions, et cetera. These are all grounded in things that we as technologists have always been doing, and so it's again elevating, Dan, to your point, back to that top line, helping to be both that bottom line supporter, but enable that top line growth through innovation, and that balance of kind of keeping the lights on, right? And how do we optimize that so we can then invest in more innovation, more technology, and do more of these things that our business partners are asking us to do.
Yeah, and bring that innovation. So when business is asking for, okay, how do we solve this problem? going through that innovation process of, looking at what's possible, because the business may say we need to get here, but we have no idea how to, and bringing them through that thought process, using the kind of the techniques and tools that we've all been sort of taught, bringing that to the business as our toolkit, and using a set of the typical sort of ideation process, and how we actually build things and solve problems. And that's the skill set that really needs to, that the business leaders are leaning on IT and say, look, what are things are possible, and then can we even do this, and being that sounding board for the how we achieve these business goals. I think that's something that comes up constantly. We're going to go into this market, we're going to go into this line of business, we're going to acquire this company, how are we going to integrate that and then build upon it? Those kind of questions are coming up constantly.
And Peter, you mentioned agility earlier and being able to flex and not be too rigid, right? I again don't want to steal anybody's thunder as we talk through this, but as we think about governance and how often, what's the cadence that we are reviewing our portfolio of projects or products that we're putting out in the marketplace. Are we ranking, scoring effectively, to say we can't do it all. Dan said it earlier, we've got limited resources, right? So how are we aligning back to the overall strategy of the business to ensure we're working on the right projects, we're producing the right products, and getting that maximized value, right? Because at the end of the day, again, that's what our business partners, that's what our customers all expect. So we do need to have some fluidity to that, but there's got to be governance around that fluidity to ensure that we are, looking at things and using the same yardstick, as we get new, demand, new asks of us, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of us use the business value, sort of formula, as a method of that yardstick. What goes into the business value formula is always a little bit of a debate. Okay, is there, there's obviously the primary stuff, the revenue, top line revenue, increasing profits, reducing cost, but the secondary pieces, it's all I would call the kind of the industry and company specific stuff about, the strategic alignment to different customer segments or whatever it is. That's where the good stuff is, because that's the stuff that really you can put your thumb on the scale a little bit, on some of those values. So I think that's that prioritization and that constant sort of rationalizing where those things sit in the order of priority. That is where I think holding them accountable. Also, when the business comes and says, "Hey, we want to do X, Y, and Z," and say, "Look, here's the yardstick we all agreed upon. Here's the business value formula. That thing doesn't stack up." If you want to do that thing, you've got to come up with a better calculation of this value, because it doesn't add up to what we think is important. So we, the business, not we, IT. So.
And I don't want to drill too much on this introductory section here, but unfortunately, a lot of us are kind of reporting into the CFO. We're bound by financial constraints, right? And not everything that aligns to the strategy or that we're going to want to do necessarily has a hard ROI associated with it, right? Some of these ROIs might be pushed out a few years from a pure financial perspective. But if we can think about, again, alignment to the strategy, our overall customer experience, right? I mean, customers at the center of a lot of our mindsets and go-to-market strategies, right? So how is that going to affect our customer experience? Is it going to give us better insights, better reporting, better analytics? All of those will have tertiary benefits that will have savings ultimately, or will help grow the top line, but they're not necessarily, a hard ROI. We can't just say, hey, we're going to move everything to the cloud because it's going to save us money. It might not at the beginning, right? Especially if we have, fully depreciated, iron that, we don't really have to do much with. There's not a dollar associated with that, but all the other benefits, that can then be measured down the road. And again, making sure we have the right weightings on that yardstick to kind of balance everything. And one more point, you said holding the business accountable too, right? So if they come to us and say, hey, we're going to save this, or we expect to gain this, we need to do those post-mortems. We need to go back and look at those things and say, did we actually achieve, partnering with you, business partner or what have you, did we actually achieve what we set out to? Because if we didn't, that's going to feed our cycle. So the next time one of these similar projects comes up, hey, we need to go back and look at what we learned from that last one to make sure that we are getting the value out of this next time through.
And Chris, I can't emphasize the point you're making enough, which is, the value of a business case, which is the language of the business,
Right.
full stop. And, to your point, that the elements of the business case are hard benefits and soft benefits. And I found, by the way, anecdotally, that a lot of IT-based business cases have a lot of soft benefits. But one of the key elements that I think you also touched on is that business case and the ownership of that business case, the champion of that business case is the business,
That's right.
right?
That's
And
right.
IT is an enabler, but it's a really I'll call it it's a facilitation in consideration where IT is potentially responsible for helping make sure that business case is in place, but ultimately it's the business that's accountable.
That's right.
One of the things we'll talk about is the governance of IT in the business and making sure that your business constituents, if they're signing up for something and signing up for an investment, their feet are going to be held to the fire too, right?
Yeah.
It's not just IT's, getting it done. It's business and IT making sure that the value is realized from the investment.
Yeah, it's a partnership. Yeah, absolutely.
So let me reflect, for a minute on this. Throughout my career, I worked for the CFO, as you mentioned, Chris. I actually worked for the head of HR at one point. Not sure why, but that's just the way it worked out. And frankly, at the time, 20 years ago, I remember our CEO saying, "I don't want IT to report to me." IT was a confusing, behind the scenes, difficult, sometimes nuisance, a requirement that you had to have there. And it's funny because at the time, it was very difficult to even know how to help the business or how to influence the business because I didn't have access to where the business was heading and what the goals were. And then you watch the evolution that's brought that IT executive into the boardroom, which has happened for many of you. If it didn't happen before the pandemic, it happened then because it said, "Hey, IT, help us, save us, implement some things, or let's turn on some things you already did implement that people ignored because they didn't want to worry about work from home or connectivity outside the office." So, it's funny to watch the evolution happen, which has brought IT to the forefront, and now we have an opportunity to take that forward because I don't think any of your companies are doing anything from a forward strategy point of view without asking IT how to help, what the impact, and what to do. So that's important. I was just curious of the audience. Anybody have any thoughts that they'd like to share in this regard before we move on to what's kind of the second topic that I already mentioned we get into? But love to hear from any of you if anybody has something they'd like to share. If anything comes up, just let us know. Any other final thoughts, Chris, before I jump?
It looks like we had a question or a
Here's a
comment come through.
Brad.
Yeah.
Get my comments opened up here. Yeah, Brad says, "I find in order to partner with the business, you need vision, but until you can prove a benefit, vision can be hampered in the beginning." For sure.
And I'll comment, and Dan's shaking his head too, so I know he's got a comment here as well. This is his sweet spot, but absolutely true. And I used to use the term permission to do things, and then somebody called me out on a webcast like this. "Hey, we don't need permission to do this stuff, right? We just, we need to." A colleague of mine says, "Crawl, walk, run." Right? Let's find some advocates. Let's find somebody that has a business case that is well built, and we can build a proof of concept. We can get buy-in to build that out at scale, and we can use that as a win to then demonstrate to our other business partners, "Hey, look what we did for the finance group, or look what we did for HR. When they were asking for more data or insights around their people, something like that, right?" And so building. not all of us can build proofs of concept. We don't have, maybe budgets or resources to do that. But if we are aligned on the right projects that meet that yardstick, and we can prove the benefits that we can do these things through an advocate, right? And then we can start to build from there. So I agree with the statement. And I've walked back on my term permission to do it, because we don't need permission. We just need to prove it, to your point.
All right. Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Chris. All right, I'm going to run us to topic 2, roles, responsibilities, and processes. And in this area of the discussion, Dan's going to lead us off. So Dan, I'll let you take the floor with regard to this.
Thanks, Jeff. So roles, responsibilities, and processes, and there's probably a lot to talk about here. But one of the things that I wanted to share with the team here is that just based on the work that we've done, we've identified, really, I'll call it kind of the 6 key roles that IT organizations are best to have. We call it kind of our organizational DNA. And when I say these are roles, these are not necessarily, a human body that's playing, each of these roles individually. With many organizations, especially in the mid-market, lots of people are wearing lots of different hats. And certainly in some larger organizations, you might have not only just individuals, but whole teams running these roles. And it's going to kind of vary from organization to organization. But when I talk about roles, these are really more like, the set of responsibilities or the hats that people wear, and they might wear different hats at different times. But just to kind of walk through them, we see the 6 are really governance, business relationship management, solution engineering, operations, security controls, and human capital. And I'll give a little bit of a breakdown on those. But governance covers a lot of different aspects of the IT, and I think that's increasingly an area that folks, our IT leaders, are thinking about. There's 2 key things that I think that kind of are important to think about from a governance perspective. One is, IT organizations are increasingly, seen as the get stuff done team, right? And, we talked a lot about how IT is a business enabler, but that enabler means really having a discipline around project and program management. And ultimately, if the IT team is either has an IT, project and program management function or role, or plays into maybe a broader one within the organization. And many IT organizations I see have that kind of that PM discipline, built into their DNA, whether they're doing it formally or informally. And increasingly, I think it's formalized. I think with that also, there's a consideration for IT organizations realizing that if technology is actually the easy stuff, and the humans are actually the tougher part. And so organizational change management is also a key aspect. And I see that I lump that typically in with the governance piece, which is the key to success is really making sure that the people on the other end of the technology are well suited, well trained, and well prepared for the change that's going to be happening. And it's not a technology, related change. The technology is just this instrument. It's really kind of around the business processes that are happening. The last thing I'll mention about the governance piece, and this plays into kind of a key philosophy that we hold, is services development and in developing a kind of end-to-end services usually happens, I'd say, kind of thinks about from an overall perspective and from a governance perspective. And when I talk about services, these are kind of end-to-end, either kind of IT services, such as like issuing a laptop or onboarding a new employee, but it can even be something that's a little bit more broader or business focused. And those services, are kind of best orchestrated, again, from a governance function. The next role I'll talk about, and I'll use a lot of Chris's language here, the business relationship management. This is, I'd say, the one of the most important roles that IT organizations can have, and again, I'm going to heavily borrow terms that Chris said, is the connective tissue between IT and the business. This is the liaison that really provides that connection, that trusted connection between IT and the business. And oftentimes an IT leader may start by playing that role, but as you grow in responsibility and as an IT leader, your responsibility, your own personal responsibilities grow. This is a role that I'd say it can be played by a trusted few within your organization, or potentially it's a dotted line relationship to folks within the business. But this is really a function that can communicate the language of the business. To one of Brad's points, can have a vision around an initiative that needs to occur, but also can provide that benefits case, that business case, and potentially co-create and partner with the business in developing that business case.
And if I can interject, I think that's really important
please.
too, Dan. It's not an order taker role, right? To the point you just made, it's working together to partner on, what is the technology going to do for that business unit or that function, right? And being proactive in doing such, and not just waiting for the business partner to come say, hey, we have a problem, and I've got a solution in mind. It should be, hey, we have the problem, help me solution, right? So we don't wait just to take that order.
Absolutely. Or we're pointing out saying, by the way, you might have a problem here, right? It is someone with enough cachet within the business that can do that. And to that point, I look to this role as being, I'll call it a little bit more senior. Some folks will say, well, I have a business analyst. Very different from a business analyst type of role. Someone who is, understanding requirements and documenting that. And, I would say that's kind of a little bit more of the next role, which is solutioning. But the business relationship manager is much more consultative, to your point, Chris. But solution engineering. So solution engineering is, it's a really shifting role within a lot of organizations where, it's not only understanding the systems, but really increasingly it's understanding a number of the vendors and the partners that are within your ecosystem. And I'd say increasingly it's really becoming much more around a partner and vendor manage type of role. What's really interesting about this role is that, certainly they're the ones that I'd say, have the final say about how solutions are architected, what technologies are used. I use the term propeller heads very lovingly, but oftentimes they also have to be able to talk in the language of the business. But this is also a team that, within a lot of organizations, as they think about not only, growing inorganically, to one of Peter's points, this is a team that can oftentimes step in and be that tiger team that supports inorganic efforts, whether it's diligence or, post-acquisition integration. They're really a set of folks that kind of understand the technologies, but also understand the technologies that you want to be able to use and support as an organization. The counterpoint to solution engineering is operations. And I like to kind of have them on two different sides, right? Solution engineering determines, helps kind of determine what are the technologies that we want to use and what are the new ones we bring in. Operations, well, they're the backbone of the organization. They're the ones who keep the lights on and ultimately run, the production of the organization. And it's an area that I'm sure that everyone here on the call is familiar with. Increasingly, though, similar to solution engineering, this is a role that's becoming also a lot of vendor management as a function, whether they're leveraging third parties as not only part of the solution set, but also third parties for providing additional services like support desk and security services, et cetera. Security is also an interesting area as well. it's a little controversial, but I'm seeing a lot of organizations separate the security policy development outside of IT, and I actually think it's a good thing. It allows IT to really focus on how security policies are applied, how controls are applied, and the policy. And IT can have a role in security policy development, but the security policies are really increasingly becoming a function, more of a business function that IT would interface with, rather than IT actually setting those policies. And then the last thing around human capital is really, acknowledging that IT is made up of not only just technologies but also humans, and the competency development, the leadership development, the skill development of those team members is increasingly important. While there's, I'll call it, the hard skills around the specific technologies that are going to be important for folks, I'd say there's also needs to be an acknowledgement around the soft skills. Again, back to the point of having folks that are able to communicate into the language of the business and really translate between, I'll call it, the technologies and how a technology opportunity or technology challenge is impacting the business.
And if I can, I'd like to make a couple comments there. So we see that in our own data as well. That when we look at our key issues outputs, for example, it'll say finding those technology skills is number one, right? Because of the skill shortage. You mentioned the Great Resignation, but for a majority of technology leaders, it's just that, Dan. It's the business acumen, it's the problem solving, the strategic and creative thinking. These are the things that are kind of bubbling to the top today, even more so than before, because we are all remote or hybrid. And we might not be shoulder to shoulder. We might not be invited to all those meetings that we knew were taking place in conference room A, because we're not actually there anymore, right? So these skills are even more important now, because we've got to be able to do that and build those relationships through a screen and not necessarily face to face. And so those business competencies, those softer skills are ranking up much higher. The other piece I'll say, just thinking about human capital, especially in the IT organization, we have a lot of individual contributors, and a lot of companies, and even Hackett has been guilty of, well, there's always a management path, and that's how you move up in your career, right? Some of our engineers are individual contributors. They don't want to manage people, right? But they still want to go somewhere. They still want to grow in their responsibilities and grow within the organization. So we, talking to, HR leaders, right? We have to be very aware of those that want to grow vertically, but also those individual contributors that want to grow horizontally, and how do we grow them and make sure that they have a competency model and they have next steps in their career as well. So putting that out there.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Anything else, Dan? We're right on time to head into with Peter here. But anything else you wanted to talk? I think you wanted to talk a little bit about outsourcing, or are we saving that?
Yeah, maybe let's talk a little bit about the IT steering committee for a moment, and because I think that plays into some of the things that we talked about, and I think it also dovetails into Peter's part. But one of the things that I'll call a key function that we recommend for all IT leaders to put in place is an IT steering committee, and this goes by a lot of different names. Some call it a business relationship meeting. Some call it the IT steer co. But one of the key elements is it's an opportunity for the IT leadership, an IT leader, and maybe even key leadership within the IT organization to get together with key leaders within the business. I would say the order of the day for those meetings are probably typically three things. One is it's an opportunity for IT to advocate and showcase the accomplishments and things that you've done as an organization. Because as you all do a lot of work, a lot of it goes unseen by the business. And it's important, to have a forum showcase that, right? There's a lot of, I'll call it, things that go bump in the night, or a lot of challenges or issues that were avoided because of the strong processes that you've all put in place as IT leaders. And it's important, I think, sometimes to remind the business about those types of things, because they do go unseen. The second part, though, is really a way for the business to help advocate and present business cases for investment. And this is a real, a chance for, as you have initiatives that you're partnering with the business on, to have a forum to talk about and to potentially have the group just, collectively decide on these initiatives. And, one of the things I like to advocate, an IT leader to have is to have the champion, the business champion, be the ones that present those business cases, be the ones that make the case and advocate, because really it's putting their skin in the game, so to speak, right? They're the ones who own the business case. And the last part about that too is that because you have all of the other business leaders in the room within these steering committees, it becomes a forum where the business leaders can really horse trade amongst themselves.
Right.
You're an organization of limited resources, and to one of Peter's points, right? You may only have enough resources to do A or B, and IT doesn't necessarily need to be in the middle of that decision. It's good that you could be in the room and to help maybe advocate or steer the conversation. But some of this really needs to be the business leaders doing it themselves. And I'd say, the steering committee is really a way to help. I call it, it's almost like a business enablement committee. And it's a way for the business leaders to, take the corporate strategy and align it with their own, particular objectives, and again, have IT is helping facilitate that process.
Yeah.
And I was just going to ask a question. So, we probably all have done this on an annual basis, right? We get everybody together and everybody yells at each other for what they want to accomplish. But what's the right cadence for something like that, Dan? I mean, is that something that organizations should do twice a year, quarterly? What do you see as being effective?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And so, by the way, I want to separate. There's an IT strategy, which we didn't really touch upon, but an IT strategy which I think should be developed by the IT organization, and that's the touchstone. That will play into the IT steering committee. An IT strategy, I suggest being developed and refreshed. It takes some time to develop it, usually about 6 to 12 weeks, depending on the organization. But it's something that should be refreshed every year. Steering committee itself is something that I like to typically see, once a month, as organizations get together. And again, it becomes a forum to talk about the initiatives that are going on, provide a bit of a status update on them as well. Some organizations do it less frequently, maybe once a quarter. I typically don't like to see steering committees go past once a quarter. Once a week is way too often. But somewhere between the once a month and once a quarter is, I'd say, probably a good cadence for bringing the group together. By the way, I don't recommend bringing in the CEO, right, or the president of the company into the steering committee. These are, in some cases, working sessions, to the point about horse trading.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the horse trading thing, because that's exactly, what those meetings, I don't want to say evolve into, but the business side will say, this is important for this reason, and here's the case, and here's the value, and all the other things. But you can only have one priority one. And if you force rank order your initiatives and say, look, we're not going to get to that. Just, yeah, we know you want it. We're not going to get to it. And it's going to be in Q2 or whenever this other thing wraps up, then we move into sort of the next thing. Because as everybody, unless the equation changes, whether it's an outsourced relationship, whether it's a, budget to bring on more headcount, whatever that conversation is. But, I think being honest about the prioritization, and being able to say, I wouldn't say push back, but just communicate the ability to say, look, we can't get to that. That's not,
Right.
it's important, but it's not as important as the number one thing that you guys decided. Everybody in the room basically said, look, you've said, this is the number one thing. We're going to get that done. And then we're going to move on to number two. And obviously, operationally, the lights stay on and everything else. But when you talk about initiatives and the bigger ones, they don't take a month. They take a quarter. They take 2 quarters. They take a year. The bigger ones are, things that just, they have phases and having people understand where we are along that path is really important.
And
So-
we've all seen the number one change midstream,
Yeah.
which is frustrating as well. Anyway,
Yeah, just a quick comment. So, it's going back to the role that Dan was talking about, the business relationship manager, the business partner, what have you. That role should help that business partner measure that business case on the yardstick that we've already established, right? So by the time we get to that meeting, they've already got all the parameters of that yardstick filled out.
Yeah.
They've worked with their IT partner, their BRM, what have you, to have that. So they're coming to the table with a fully prepped business case. And so that way to both, Peter and Dan, we can do the horse trading because we can see, all of those elements and the weight of those elements, and that helps us prioritize and stack rank. And to, Peter's point, hey, if these are all the things that we agree on are strategic, have an ROI, mitigate risk, et cetera, then, everything else gets pushed down the, pushed down the queue. So
And we'll get to it. Yeah.
okay, so we need to bounce forward. So Peter, I'll let you take
Yeah.
the reins with the team development and empowerment. We're sitting at about quarter till, so I want to make
Yeah,
sure we get a chance to talk this topic.
Yeah, totally. And I think we've already talked a lot about team members. We talked about skills a little bit. If you look at from the top down, from the CIO, from the the kind of the 3 C's of credentials, credibility, and confidence. Having the underpinnings to say, look, and the credibility with the management team to have these discussions. That's at the top level, but right below that, your L2s, having the next level of leadership, being able to have them be able to communicate, in some cases in your stead, or grooming them to be either senior leaders, that ability, having them practice on you as a how to make a case, how to communicate in a meeting, how to be and it can start as early as literally the person comes out of their undergrad into your organization, and then you start training them on communication day one, so that they're not building that human capital and the softer skills from day one is really important. And I know we talk a lot in this group about soft skills, but it's true. They need to be able to communicate, writing and verbally, to make a case and not go down a rabbit hole in technical details with the wrong audience. It's okay to get on a whiteboard with a bunch of other technical people and go down a rabbit hole, no problem. But if you're trying to talk to the business, you do not want to overwhelm them with terms and acronyms, and you're just going to get the blank stares and you're not going to get anywhere. So being able to break down the problem, communicate what the problem is, and communicate your solution or your proposed solution in a cogent and confident way, I think that's probably one of the biggest skill sets, for your IT organizations, building out those things. And it comes in sort of formal education. It comes in informal education. So having people, kind of stand and deliver, if they're going to, present an idea or present a case or present a solution, have them formally present it to you and your group, and start with the most junior of your team and work up from there. Because, obviously, some of the folks that come out of, right out of, a technical degree, they may not have had that, that experience in their academic career. And then if they stayed as a technical resource for, if they moved into other jobs, they may not have had some of those softer things. So I think building out that skill set, and one of the things, Chris, I think you said, in the work from anywhere arena, it's harder to do these presentations because, unless everybody turns on their camera, you can't read the room as well. You're not getting that kind of bouncing back and forth. But that is also a skill set unto itself, being able to kind of present in a virtual way and being able to break down what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, and when you're going to say it. I think in a more formal way, and I'll make the pitch, as a adjunct person, as a faculty member, can you have people go back to school for, get their master's in whatever? Yeah, that's great. And that will give them some of the more of this academic underpinning that they need in some cases, because having somebody with a really killer technical background and then having somebody with the business understanding, that's how you get those business relationship managers. That's a lot of the things they need to understand is how to talk business, how to understand what the financial models work, how, those things that you would get in a typical sort of academic program. Those are great. You can also grow your own. You don't have to send everybody back to school. You can do your own learning, programs. I know a lot of folks have internal universities, even things like the LinkedIn Learning program. I mean, that's amazing how some of those tools work. And you can also give them a curriculum and say, look, you need to take this course, and this course over a year or over 2 years or whatever it is. And, so make it as formal or informal as you want, but spend the time to think about what their portfolio of skills looks like. And I agree with Dan when you said kind of growing vertically and horizontally. I think the answer to that, maybe Chris said the idea that if they're going to grow, horizontally in more skills, having them do certifications, like everybody knows, like the Microsoft certifications, the Amazon certification, the AWS certifications, those programs require a set of discipline. It requires discipline to get through those. And, upskilling your current workforce, there's nothing bad that's going to happen with that. Are they potentially going to leave? Yes, if they're not happy. But if you keep them happy and then you give them more skills, they'll probably stick around for a longer time. And you give them the opportunities to use those skills. So, hey, we're moving more workloads into AWS. Okay, you need to be certified. And here's how you're going to get there. And then, by the way, you're going to take all those great things you already know, and you're going to go and build out a whole new set of skills. That's powerful stuff. And if they do leave, I know the big term, the great resignation, can you replace them? If you can't, then getting really good at recruiting and managing vendors, because, there's always a vendor that's going to come in and say, yep, we can help you with that. You don't have anybody to manage that workload. Okay, we can do that for you. Whether, it's everything from, the cloud platforms and other, even DevOps structures. All of that stuff can be managed with good vendor relationships. So there's a lot of, yes, empower your team, but when you can't either, if you don't have them and you can't get them, getting those great relationships and getting them going and then nurturing those relationships is definitely a key set of skills.
I think that's core, is using your vendors strategically, right? We don't use them just as staff hog. If you use them as staff hog, hey, we've got a rate card, we'll do this. That's all they'll ever be. If you want them to grow as a partner, and we talk about partnering with our business partners, we need to partner with our vendors too. And so use them strategically, invite them to those strategy meetings within the technology function so they know where the organization is going, so they can seek out those skills too. Because frankly, they're facing skill shortages as well. So.
Right. Although they will never tell you that. The vendors will always say, we can do it.
Of course. So, but if you use them strategically, they can get out in front of it too, right?
Absolutely, right. And then, bringing them into the planning sessions is a great idea, because then when they're thinking about what's coming up for you as a client, they're thinking about their staffing plans and saying, this looks like, company A is going to need this type of initiatives coming up. It's being prioritized in Q2. We should start recruiting for that now, because we know we're going to get that work and, get ahead of it, as you said. It's a great example. So
one thing I'll add to your point, Peter, which is, I think you talked a lot about kind of the growing of the skills within IT itself. Yeah. And one thing I'll also add is that IT is also increasingly becoming the focal point for skilling the rest of the organization as well.
Yeah, totally.
And the term that I've heard out there is, upskilling the organization. But a couple key elements there. One is, IT from a support desk perspective is less becoming more of a focal point for break fix, and really becoming a focal point for supporting a business process in terms of how do they run some of their business processes
Mhm.
using the platforms that you've helped put in place as an IT leader.
Mhm.
The other part is that the end users are really increasingly becoming more sophisticated,
Oh, absolutely.
and and if you're looking to do more with the same, which most IT leaders are, being able to hand some of the responsibility of lightweight automation or
Sure.
data analysis and reporting over and back to the business is increasingly becoming important. And in fact, many business teams are looking to do that themselves. And this
Yeah.
is where the concepts of, say, things like robotic process automation and providing, not only just tools, but kind of I call it the walled gardens that certain individuals can use those tools for either data analytics or data transformation in a call it a more lightweight way, in a kind of a more contained way.
Yeah.
But it allows you to take some of that capacity off of the IT team's plate, and it allows the business team to feel more empowered to get the work done.
Well, I think this upskilling, the sort of the corollary or the extension of distributing the work, because, as long as they're using your tool sets, and we're not talking about rogue, shadow IT here, we're talking about sanctioned facilities, like, you mentioned like the analytics thing, BI space, those tools are so good and so accepted by the business. If you train them, you give them the right tool set, you give them the data sets that they need to work with, and they go and they do their own data exploration. They do that's a great example of distributing it, and it doesn't end up on your workload. And you've basically empowered those end users and the power users, and then they evangelize, out to the rest of the business. I mean, if you can get them doing that work, and they feel like, hey, now IT is an enabler, the true enabler, because they gave me this amazing tool to do this work. That I would normally have to go, do the asynchronous request, like, hey, I need this done. No response. And then they go back and forth. They just do it themselves with the improved toolkit.
You do less,
okay.
you look like a hero.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's 3 minutes till 12. Any quick questions anybody have for Chris, Dan, or Peter? And if not, each of you in that order, how about a quick summary from each of you, and then we'll sign off. Chris?
Yeah, and I think, between myself, Peter, and Dan, we could talk for hours on this stuff. We're all obviously passionate about it. I was going to make a point of change management, talking about enabling our users, right? Just make sure we have that change management that Dan brought up, so they know how to use these things. So we're not building tools that aren't being used. IT is evolving. We're between us and I'll give kudos to our HR partners too, as enabling functions, as getting us through, the pandemic, being resilient, agile, and having to partner for those skill sets. We need to be looking to the future and thinking about this partnership in a different way than probably we traditionally have. Otherwise, we're going to get left behind. So,
right. Dan, final thoughts?
Yeah, I'll say to Chris's point, and one of my favorite IT leaders coined this phrase, so I can't take credit for it, but they said, IT is becoming less about technology, and the role of an IT leader is really about managing the process of changing business processes. And I'd say that, with that kind of philosophy, I think it's a recipe for success as a technology leader.
Yeah.
So I'll leave
Peter?
it there.
Yeah, I think the leadership and partnership, putting those two words, that is probably the crux of this whole thing, is being a good partner to the business. And the more you can do, kind of reaching across and breaking down the silos and giving them the ability to say, we are your partner. That's how things get done a lot more efficiently. So I'll say that. And I will say thank you to the Confer Group, and good seeing some folks I've met in the past. So thanks for having me back.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks to the three of you. Thanks to everybody for attending. It's great to see everybody, and have a great weekend coming up. And thanks for your time today, everyone.